Hello again, everybody. This is Darick at ScreamingEagleAirsoft.com, and today we're going to do another know-it-all video. Today's know-it-all video is FPS versus BB weight. Okay, I know there's a conversation out there, and people are arguing both points, and I just want to kind of put my 2 cents in on that and try to explain it using the laws of physics. Okay, I wrote down some knowledge right here, and so if you see me looking down, it's because I want to get my facts straight, basically. Okay, okay. The weight of your BB, we're going to call that mass. Okay, so if you got a 0.20 or a 0.23, 0.25, 0.40, what have you, that is the mass of the BB. You also have, these are variables that will affect my discussion, okay? Mass is the first variable, probably the most important variable. The next variable is your gun, okay? Your gun's a variable because it has a lot of variables built into it. It has either a tight bore barrel, it has a long barrel, it has a hop-up, it has a strong spring, it has a good air seal. All these things will increase the air pressure, increasing your FPS. Okay, now so your FPS, we'll call it feet per second, which is velocity. Okay, that's the velocity or speed that the BB is flying. Okay, if you this initial velocity is usually measured with a chronograph, and that chronograph is anywhere between 1 and 6 inches from the tip of the barrel. So the FPS of your gun is really just the initial velocity of the BB. Okay, the weight of the BB, the more mass the BB has, the lower the FPS will be coming out of your gun. Okay, so if you use a .12 and it's going to shoot like 460, 499, let's say, and then I put a 20 in, I'm shooting 450. I put a 25 in, I'm shooting 399. So with the same gun, the same variables, I'm only changing the weight of the BB. It's going to affect your velocity. Okay. So far, you all understand that. I think there's no disputing that out there anywhere. Everybody understands that. Heavier BBs slow down the FPS of your gun. Now, how does that affect you 100 feet down the line? That's the question. Okay, what is the impact of that BB? How does it hit that target? Okay, there are variables that affect it after it leaves the barrel. One of the variables is gravity. It pulls the BB down. Another variable is just the air pressure in the area. The BB has to travel through the air, pushing the air out of its way all the way to the target. So that air, the more pressure the air is, usually at sea level, it has the most impact on your BB. If you go up high altitude, like Denver, let's say, and you shoot a BB, that air pressure will have less impact. It will not slow your BB down as much. Okay, another variable will be crosswind. Okay, if you have a wind impacting your BB might move off to the left or right. These are variables that affect the BB. Also, your hop up, or the back spin of your BB as it leaves the barrel, it's flying along, and the once the initial velocity starts to bleed off, gravity takes a hold of the BB and starts to pull it down. Well, that hop up, or I should say the backspin, or the centrifugal force of that BB spinning backwards, is to counteract gravity and give it a little bit of lift, so that gravity doesn't affect it as soon. It will eventually affect it. The BB will eventually, pow, hit the ground, but instead of hitting here, you want it to hit there. So the backspin keeps it flying a little bit longer before it hits. If you have too much backspin, then it'll overcome gravity and it'll take off. If you don't have enough backspin, gravity will take a hold of the BB and it'll drop. So that is another variable. Okay. So you know that you have the weight of the BB, the mass. You have the gun shooting the BB out at an initial velocity. And you have variables affecting the BB. Wind, air pressure, hop, gravity. These things will take that BB and move it places. Okay? It'll slow it down. As soon as the BB leaves the barrel, it's affected by all of these variables. As soon as it gets out of your gun, it starts to be affected by everything. Okay, so heavier BBs, okay, the heavier the BB, the less it is affected by external factors. Once a body is in motion, it wants to stay in motion. So if you have a heavier BB, it will want to stay in motion longer. Basically, it will not be affected by the wind. The wind hits it. If the wind's not hard enough, it won't move that heavier object. So your drift on a heavier BB is going to be a lot less. Okay. Lighter BBs, when they get hit by wind, they take off in a different direction. So to combat wind, you want to use a heavier BB. But also remember that a heavier BB reduces your initial velocity. So it's a trade-off on that, but accuracy to FPS, or initial velocity. But here comes my second point. If you have a gun that shoots .20s at 450, and you have the same gun that shoots .25s at 400, the range should be fairly similar. If this is the extreme of velocity and this is the lightest BB, when you shoot, okay, the velocity is going to drop faster, and the BB is going to be affected by all those variables faster, and you're going to get a range about here. Okay, so if I take my FPS and I let me rephrase that. If I increase the weight of my BB, which will decrease my FPS when I shoot it, again, the wind and other variables will not affect the BB as much. Same thing with the velocity. It's going to stay pretty constant. And guess what? You'll get about the same range. So a faster, lighter BB will shoot about the same distance as a heavier, slower BB. Okay, from the same gun. Okay, if you take now that's only if you keep the same variables. If you throw another variable in, it's going to change the whole formula. So if I have a gun that shoots 200 and I put a 25 in and it shoots this far, and then I have a gun that shoots 200 but leave the 25 in, it's going to shoot further. Duh. Okay, so a heavier BB is unaffected by, or I should say it's less affected by variables that I'm talking about, the resistance variables, and the initial FPS will increase your range without changing variables. Okay. I don't know if I just said that right, but okay. So I'll sum up here in just a minute. So it's very important to know that FPS and weight, knowing your FPS and the weight of the BBs that it's being measured against, is important when you're trying to compare FPS pressure that a gun is imposing upon BBs. Okay, so if a gun that's advertised is saying 400 FPS but with 12s, and then another gun says 400 FPS with 20s, well, you know that 400 with 20s has got more pressure, because if you threw 12s in, it would jack it up. Okay. But here's the argument that's not really, this is the second half of the video, last 1/3 of it. The argument that's not being really discussed out there, which I think is the most important, no, it's not that important. Accuracy is the most important. But this is vitally important also. I want to know how hard my BB is striking my target when it gets there. I want to know the impact, the sting that my BB is instituting upon my opponent. I want to know if when I hit that guy, he's going to say, ow. I want to know if it's going to break his skin. I want to know if he's going to blow it off because he didn't even feel it, didn't even move the fabric of his cloth. I want to know these things. So let me tell you the different factors that affect the impact of the BB. I'm sorry, it seems like I'm getting long-winded. I need to shorten this. Okay. You all know the formula E equals MC squared. Okay? E being the sting. E is the power, the sting that BB impacts upon your opponent. M is the mass, so or weight of your BB. C is velocity, okay, or FPS. We'll call it FPS. So E equals MC squared means that if you increase, it means the mass and the velocity will affect your sting. That's pretty obvious. If you hit somebody really fast with a heavy BB, it's going to hurt, okay? If it's a lighter BB, it's not going to hurt as much. And if it's not as fast, it's not going to hurt as much. Duh. Okay, but let's continue on. Okay. If you see the formula, E equals MC squared, which I'll put somewhere in this area if I can. If you increase the mass, it'll increase the E. If you increase C, velocity, it will increase E. Okay. But if you notice, mass is just mass. Velocity is squared. Okay. If you take mass and you increase it, you will get, let's say you double mass. The mass variable will be doubled. That's awesome. Okay. But if you double velocity, you're doing more than double because it's squared. You're actually multiplying it by 4. So let's just say mass is 1 and velocity is 1. Then your power is going to be 1. Great. Okay, so that's how much sting, 1. Now let's say you take your mass and you double your BB. You go from a 20 BB to a 0.4 BB. Okay, so you double it. So now you have mass is 2, velocity is 1. Guess what? Your sting is 2. You just doubled the sting. Awesome. Okay, but let's say you go back to your 1 and 1. Okay, and that equals 1. You have a 1 mass, but you go with a 2 velocity. You go from maybe a 200 FPS gun to a 400 FPS gun. Let's just say that's doubling it. Okay, so now a 2 squared is 4. So now your sting is 4. So doubling your velocity impacts your sting twice as much. It's squared. Okay, so you know that doubling your mass does increase your sting, but increasing your FPS will greatly increase your sting. Okay, but now, having said that, I'm going to put a disclaimer on it. When you measure your FPS, you're only measuring it at the initial 1 to 6 inches out of the barrel. As the BB is traveling downrange towards your target, remember, those lighter BBs that are allowing you a higher FPS are being affected by the resistance variables more. So when it hits your target, it might not be traveling very fast. It might be going half the velocity it initially was. So if you're doing that, you're greatly reducing your impact. But those heavier BBs, they retain the FPS. Even though the initial FPS has been lowered, it'll stay pretty much a constant all the way to your target. So that when it hits, it maintains its mass, because mass will not change no matter where it is along the track, but the velocity will have been changed due to resistance. So, to sum up, I would say that a heavier BB is better than a lighter BB because it's not affected by wind, it's not affected as much as from gravity, because it's going to keep its initial trajectory. What am I trying to say? The wind resistance is not going to affect it that much because it's going to maintain its inertia throughout the entire journey until it hits the target. So my light BBs will, even though they leave the barrel super fast, they might impact with the same velocity as a heavier BB, and at that point the heavier BB is going to give them more of a sting, and it's going to be more accurate. So on most fields that I've seen, most players play with 25s, and that's why, because they want it to be more accurate. They also want it to be more, give it more of a sting at the end, and nobody ever uses 12s, and very few people use 20s. Okay, my last point. I thought that last point was my last point, but okay. You take the same situation I'm talking about, and you get into a close quarters scenario. You're 10 feet away from a guy, and you hit him. And you hit him with a high FPS, low BB weight. He's gonna sting more than if you hit him with a low BB, a high BB weight and a low FPS, because there has not been enough range to have been affected by the wind and the other resistance variables. So when he gets hit at close range, he's really stinging if it's a high FPS gun. You're breaking skin. But if you're shooting, but if you have a heavier BB and lower FPS, it won't sting as much. Okay, so FPS is very important at a close quarters situation. Further out, not so much, because it's been affected by all these variables. So, is FPS important? Yes. But that's only when compared to the BB weight. You cannot just say FPS is important. Duh. I mean, that's not a complete statement, because the weight and the FPS work together in harmony to get you a kill. So the argument is, and I believe that a lot of people are saying that FPS is important because they are comparing it against one standard BB weight, let's say 25s. So yes, it's important if you don't variable the BB weight. If it's the same, then FPS is important. You'll have a shorter range, you'll have a longer range, blah blah blah, yada yada yada. But you cannot just say FPS is important, because if you're not using the same BB weight to compare those FPSs, then the argument's lost. Okay, I hope I didn't confuse everybody with FPS, BB weight, velocity, gravity, and all that stuff, but it is all affecting your BB. And if you have any questions, you can always email Darick at screamingeagleairsoft.com. You can also comment on this video. I frequently read these comments. Thank you for watching this video. Remember, when you're on the field, play safe.